Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Courtney Forehand. I'm the CML Training and Marketing Specialist. Today's webinar is about drought preparedness for Colorado, but before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, on June 18th, CML will be hosting a virtual workshop for effective governance. This is a workshop for newly elected officials. The topics will include managing effective relationships within the media, open meeting laws and standards, ethic laws, and more. So please join us for that. It is $40 for members and $60 for non-members. And it'll also be from 9 a.m. to 3:30 on a Friday. For more information, please just visit our website at www.cml.org. Finally, this webinar is being recorded and our presentation materials will be put on our website by the end of the day under training materials. Please note that participants have been muted upon entry, but we do have a question box that we will be monitoring. So we encourage you to type your questions into that question panel as you think of them throughout the presentation. And if you would like to minimize the control panel for the GoToWebinar, there should be an orange arrow to the top right. Please just press that arrow and it'll minimize your control panel. With that said, I would like to hand things over to Megan to begin our presentation.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. Happy gloomy, rainy day, which is a good condition to talk about drought. My name is Megan Holcomb, and I work with the Colorado Water Conservation Board, and that's in the Department of Natural Resources, where I'm a senior climate specialist. And my priority kind of focus there at the CWCB is really the topics of drought resilience efforts, drought response, and water innovation generally. Mostly I help convene interdisciplinary work groups, such as the Basin Roundtable process, the drought response structure that I'm going to talk about today, and help coordinate interagency climate action across the state. So my goal today is just to help answer some basic questions around what the state's drought response structure looks like and what kind of tools and resources are available to support water management in our ongoing current drought cycle. You will hear more about local response coordination from Jason after. So I just have about 10 slides here, and sounds like we're going to do questions at the end after both of our presentations here. So let's see if I have this set up right. Awesome. So this is a looped image of all 2020 weekly drought monitor maps. This only goes up until December, so you don't see the improvements that have been had in the Northeast in the last few weeks, but really looking at an increasingly arid Four Corners regions all the way to the Eastern Plains. There's not a single Colorado county that can expect to avoid any long-term drought impacts on their ecosystems or local economies. I'm going to pause real quick and ask, I've got a notification that says I'm experiencing technical shortages. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you and I can still see your screen, and you're not glitching in your webcam.
Okay, I'm gonna ignore the message then, but if so, just jump in. So let's see. So our whole state is certainly vulnerable to drought, and this representation, it looks like the loop here has stopped, of the last year really shows that even though last winter we had an okay, meaning mostly average peak snowpack in 2020, we know it melted out too fast. There was a warm, dry, and windy spring, which dominated most of the state and resulted in rapid expansion of drought in all Four Corners. And there were these interesting series of events of just really high winds and hot temperatures, specifically over the Eastern Plains in May and June, that led to what we saw as extreme evaporative demands and high evapotranspiration rates, meaning moisture was being stripped from soil and crops very quickly because of high winds and high heat. There was also another fourth season, actually, of absent monsoon moisture. And particularly in the southern half of the state and southwest. So moisture that we tend to see in the late summer that was absent resulted in another hot and dry late summer, one of the hottest and driest August across the state, particularly across western Colorado. And those summer-like conditions really lasted through October in 2020. And we saw those critically high evaporative demands in the fall as well, which was a combination ripe for the explosive fire activity we saw last fall. And there's a drought timeline here that I have next to this map. I'm actually going to switch slides, and I have the same timeline. Whoa, control issues. Okay, you should see the timeline there, and then a very simple wheel. That wheel figure depicts the simple sequence of events in the state's drought response plan. So essentially, we're always, regardless of drought conditions, in this monitoring phase. And typically in that phase one of frequent monitoring, we have what's called the Water Availability Task Force that meets every month with climate specialists and water providers around the state that report out regularly on current conditions and outlooks for the next few months. And so that's always a check-in for water providers to be able to, that's a public meeting as well. Anyone can call in and hear what the current conditions are and what we're looking at for the next few months. But it was really, when concerning drought conditions set in last spring, that's when the state really initiated discussions with the director level task force to evaluate those emerging impacts and really keep watch on the need to activate the state plan, which ended up being activated in, those discussions happened in May. And at first that phase two, which is that just like standard red color there, that was activated by the governor on recommendation from a drought task force, which is basically a group of directors from all state agencies. That phase two was activated initially for only 40 counties in southern and eastern Colorado, as well as activating a task force called the Agricultural Impact Task Force, really to be this responsive group that replies or like feeds up any sort of concerns that are on the ground in our ag communities. And it was in September 21 that we actually shifted activation of phase two to the entirety of our state, an additional 24 counties, which was the same week that the USDA updated their national drought disaster designations to cover all 64 Colorado counties as well. So we were certainly feeling the impacts of a warm summer statewide, and that continued. That trend continued so strongly that we moved into phase three activation on November 30th, which doesn't change much of the response structure at all or the resources that were already available, but it did also initiate a municipal water task force, knowing that we were going into a very rough, after a rough 2020 and the conditions did not look great for the summer. It's really our ag communities that feel drought most intensely in the first year, even if there's accumulation, and our municipalities feel it in subsequent years when their supply, particularly reservoirs and snowpack, are concerning. So that really brings us to today, which is better than where we're at in the fall, but only really for the northeast part of the state. Most of the west and southern Colorado had not a great spring. This wet spring that we're seeing here has been pretty centralized to the Front Range and northeast of the state. So conditions have really shifted from about 25%, it was around 25% in D4, that is exceptional drought, and that's now down to 16%. But there's a caveat that I always like to share when I share these drought maps, which is the US Drought Monitor, which is for the entire US, is this retroactive log by 1 week of conditions. So when you see maps like this, it's really a look backwards of the last week of conditions. And so it's good that we're seeing these improvements, but it's not an indication of where we're headed. clearing up in the season makes sense. We hopefully should be seeing some more moisture, and that snowpack coming down slowly is always the goal, and not too quick. But these maps can be a bit confusing because it is standardized by season. So essentially, a drought map drawn in April depicts conditions relative to other Aprils, and they're not necessarily comparable to, oh, this drought map is so much better than what we saw in August. Those are, August is compared to August, and that's just how this particular data source works. So just keep in mind that the drought monitor is a recording log, and when we improve or change categories from week to week, there's not necessarily a connection to directionality or the outlook of drought. So unfortunately, the overall water year shows a continuance of the 2020 drought cycle, likely to remain through the entirety of this calendar year, at least. These are long lead forecasts from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center, and they show extremely high confidence in above average temperature outlooks through the remainder of this year, and for Colorado even through well into next year. So that's not a forecast that's likely to change anytime soon. This is the global trend. And when it comes to precipitation, this is a 3-month outlook map, and it shows you that dark brown bullseye has been moving around a bit, but certainly has kept Colorado in its grips of below average precipitation outlooks. So without getting too in the weeds here with structure, this is a graphic that tries to summarize really how coordination works at the state level to be able to be really responsive to needs, emergency or long-term needs for drought response. And the governor is the person who really writes the memos and activates any sort of state disaster declarations, and it moves us in or out of different phases. Those lead agencies are that's the drought task force that I discussed, which are essentially representatives or directors from every agency. And then these task forces these are like the folks that are actually on the ground, who are hearing concerns, who are helping people at local or regional levels. And those task forces really are the ears to the ground, eyes on the land. What's happening? Where should we be putting attention and having conversations or pushing resources towards any particular area? So that water availability task force is always activated regardless of the state drought plan activation. And then right now we only have the agricultural and the municipal task forces, that are activated, and not the energy or wildlife ones at the moment. There was a wildlife task force last summer in response to the fires explicitly, so we were in coordination with that group, but didn't feel a need to have a separate coordination group around that topic. So let's see, whoops. I think I just lost. I'm not doing very good at controls here. Okay. Okay, there we go. So those two task forces are, there's a set of recommended actions for that group in the state drought plan, but it is entirely dependent on the type of drought we're seeing, what's actually needed, and that those representatives are meant to be just like fast tracking any sort of information to the state and then up to federal level that we need to know about, and vice versa back down to those, whether it's a municipality, a actual like independent producer, any kind of resources that we have, tools, funding, etc. We try and use those groups as kind of a fast pipeline back and forth. Since the agricultural task force had been activated since the summer, they have a few interesting work products, and while this is a municipal focused conversation, they are still really helpful, and these are products that we're going to build from with the municipal impact task force as well. So that website, cwcbcolorado.gov/drought, has been reworked to be really visual and trying to reorganize resources that we had on our old CWCB site in a way that's a little bit more intuitive. So I encourage you to check that out. But this is a 2-pager, just a screenshot of a 2-pager that the Ag group pulled together. And this was really a part of long discussions with the task force of what are conditions right now, what are recommended actions for policymakers and others. And I will share that this information from that task force was directly utilized for 2 Senate bills that are being passed either today or tomorrow. Senate bill, I think it's 234 and 35, which is helping bring some stimulus funding to drought resilience and response. So that's an exciting use of the task force time and expertise. We also have this short link here for what we call the Colorado Drought Report or Drought Stories. This is an interactive kind of story collection place that we summarize just very high level kind of what Colorado was experiencing in 2020. And there's 50 different first person accounts from the agricultural lens in communities across the state on not just how they felt impacts, but what producers do about that. Like, where are their lessons learned being implemented from previous droughts? What kind of changes are made at different parts of the season? There's a lot of just short 2-3 minute video clips there and news stories from throughout 2020 that we have compiled as basically a record of Colorado's drought in 2020, and we anticipate building on these stories this year as this drought cycle continues. So I encourage you to check these resources out. It helps us stay aware of the balance between highlighting just real-time stories of impact and pain and the reality of how challenging limited water is, and also stories of resilience in our water communities. So those stories that inspire climate action, drought related or not, are helpful to share amongst communities to inspire neighbors to do something similar, or call up their neighbor who, whether it's a town or a producer or some sort of business that took a particular action, by highlighting those stories of response actions, it exposes more of us in Colorado to what another person could do. So I like sharing not just the painful stuff, because I've gotten really used to what I call being the bad news girl, and that gets old, but this is where we are. So with the Municipal Impact or Municipal Water Task Force, it's a similar structure, but it has just got kicked off in end of December, beginning of January. So this is co-chaired by the Department of Local Affairs and myself, and Jason serves on this. He can talk a little bit about how his drought response coordination groups are liaisoning with this group and participating. But same as the agricultural group, it's meant to be highly responsive to what's actually needed and where we're hearing major concerns. So is there a town that is having to ship in water or having to take some sort of action that they might need state support, where they don't even anticipate, getting sort of the highway traffic regulations changed to bring in hay, like that. Those are things that have happened in the past that you don't. We try and be prepared for those kinds of that kind of assistance at the state level to make sure there's not a huge a backlog of the kind of resources we're trying to bring into the state in this kind of year. So this group is in coordination with other state and regional partners, but there was a survey that we sent out at the beginning of January, went to 122, or we got 122 responses from water providers in all 4 corners, and that really directly informed the type of initial goals and needs at the municipal level. So this task force is meeting once a month, and it's, depending on need, can meet more regularly or not, but you can follow activity of this group at that cwcb.colorado.drought or .gov/drought. I think I have that link posted elsewhere, and we'll take you to an engagement page where you can ask questions, follow the news feed. There's admittedly not a ton of activity yet, and a lot of us are in this kind of wait and see mode. The only other, there we go. So that's the link for you if you want to go to the CWCB site. And those are the two buttons that you can click to follow the agricultural engagement page or the municipal engagement page. There's also options there to look at funding, questions around explaining drought, how vulnerable is Colorado, how to plan and prepare, things that are more long-term responses. And I'm, proud to say that a lot of new resources will also be available on a brand new site that is not even out yet. I have a frozen screen. So this summer we have a new site, climate.colorado.gov, and new. I'm getting virus notifications, apologies. Climate.colorado.gov is a place that you can go right now. There's a landing page. You can sign up and be alerted when the site goes live. But there's going to be a ton of resources, several which will be drought related. That's tools, data, plans, frameworks, etc. That there'll be a really incredible search function that the state's helping us build to be able to pull together not just CWCB's water related support, but really anything remotely related to climate action for local governments and municipalities to more easily access all of the state's climate related resources for preparedness, response, coordination, etc. From all departments. So I'm really excited about that. This slide is just a sampling of the kind of state plans that we have that have evolved in the last few years. The water plan is just one of these, but we have things related to renewable energy, the resilience of the new resiliency framework, the greenhouse gas reduction roadmap. These are all samplings of the types of resources that will be available on that climate website, along with various adaptation tools. These are more interactive resources for communities to kind of inquire at their own scale. What is my wildfire risk? What is my flood risk? What is the economic cost of drought, flood, or fire in my county? And then this new equity data viewer, which we're working on right now. There's a beta version out, but that will be complete this summer. So that website is to come, but will be a nice, we're calling it more of a clearinghouse, where you can find a short snippet of, oh, this is a resource that I need, and then you can go to that state agency's page for more information. So those are the primary just kind of resources we have to share today, but I'm sure Jason has a lot of interesting information at the local level and municipal scale, and I'm happy to take questions after Jason, but I'm going to hand it over to you. See if, I think that's my final slide. See how I hand off here. Oh, Courtney's on it.
All right, hello everybody. Thank you very much, Megan. Excellent presentation. And let me get my slide ready. Okay, just to make sure, can everyone see that?
Yes, we can, thank you.
Wonderful. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Feinhout, and I'm with Denver Water. I act as our water shortage preparedness manager. And it's a relatively new position at Denver Water. Really only in the last couple of years was this a position that we decided that we needed. My background is in emergency management, which I think for those of you that are familiar with emergency management, the tenets of it, you'll see that we've started to incorporate those thoughts into drought and water shortage preparedness. And so what I want to do today is I want to show you a little bit about Denver Water, and then I want to show you what we've done recently to start preparing on the municipal level for water shortage. And of course I say water shortage because it's not just drought. As some jurisdictions have seen, wildfires have played a part inside of kind of curbing the amount of water that's available. Denver Water gets 50% of our supply from the Colorado River, so any curtailments on that will also impact our supply. So water shortage is kind of the general concept that we plan for. Doesn't really necessarily matter why the supply is lower, we can have the same response. And so I'm hoping that some of the things we've done will be helpful to you. Perhaps you can take some of them with you to your municipality. And then we'll also talk about the coordination and communication that we've been doing along the Front Range and with some of our Western partners in this current drought that we've been facing. So So let's go ahead and start. First off, just a couple of facts about Denver Water. Some of you may know these, some might not. We were established about 100 years ago, and that was from a culmination of a couple of different water utilities that were in the area. And so currently we serve 25% of the state's population, 1.5 million people, but using only less than 2% of the water that is used overall in the state, which we're pretty proud of. That's through a lot of our conservation and just the way that our system is set up. So where does our water come from? It's actually 50% from the South Platte River and 50% from the Colorado River. So pretty much divided down the middle. And you will see that this year that has caused very much a disparate in systems, right? So one system, the South Platte's doing very well or doing around average, a little above average. And one system, the Colorado, is not. And we're very aware of that, and also the pain that the Western Slope is feeling because of those conditions. You can see our watershed and miles of pipe, and our infrastructure is pretty complex. A lot of it was set up early on and still works beautifully today. So what has Denver Water been doing as far as water shortage? I love this slide. We'll stay on it for just a little bit because there is an awful lot to look at here. But you'll see that Denver is not a stranger to drought, and of course neither is most of the state. We have had multiple droughts and also in general water shortages. So if you look through here, you'll see that some of these are indeed pretty significant droughts, but some are just different other items that have happened be limiting our supply. So in the 1920s, we had the lack of supply that we could actually bring the water over that we had rights to. So we had to start building infrastructure. And with each one of these, we responded by building infrastructure or by signing plans and everything like that. And in the 2000s, it is no different. But the 2000s, it started a completely different type of planning for us, right? In the past, we've always been able to build our way out of it and kind of make agreements to get ourselves back to where we needed to be. But starting really 2002, 2003, we realized that we had to look internally, had to look at conservation, we had to look at recycled water. And then the 2012, 2013 drought is when we really started the coordination. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of take you back to 2002. So in 2002, 2003, very significant drought. And afterwards, we did an after action report. Basically, what went right, what went wrong in our response to drought. And one of the big lessons that we learned is that the current plan that we had at that point did not anticipate the suddenness of the 2002 drought. It came on with such a ferocity and was so significant, and our current plans did not take that into account. So we knew that we needed to start, number one, coordinating with partners. We couldn't just go it alone, but also that we had to start changing things internally. One of the things that we implemented in 2003 and is still implemented to this day are called our annual summer watering rules. And some of the municipalities out there may notice that these rules are the same as potentially your stage 1 drought restrictions. And that's on purpose. We wanted to make sure that we were proactive and that we put these into place every single year, no matter if it's a wet year or a dry year. And it matches up with a lot of jurisdictions' stage 1 drought restrictions, because we feel that if we can get and we've been successful in this, but if we could get our customers into a mentality of saving, that they would continue to do it and it'll just be natural. And so those have already started beginning of the month, and they'll continue until October 1st, even though luckily, because of the wet and cold weather, irrigation has not really picked up at all, as we'll see here in a second for the Denver metro area. The next thing that we did is we realized that we needed to have a more robust plan. The plan we had was very much specific, again, to just looking at Denver Water. We didn't look at our partners and how we incorporate into the state as a whole. You'll see the website up here, denverwater.org/shortage. I encourage you to visit it. You'll find our water shortage response implementation plan, and then you'll also find links to water efficiency plan. You'll see how we make decisions, and you'll see our different drought stages. So after designing the plan, we decided, again, to bring in my position. That was a couple of years ago that they created the position. And then we decided that one of the big things that happened in 2002, 2003, and somewhat in 2012 was that internally in Denver Water, we were all working on what we work on. We're all focusing on the goals that we have per section and per division, but there wasn't really communication between divisions. And so all of a sudden you started to see redundancy of effort, started to see gaps in our response. And you started to see that some divisions were moving forward with projects that actually would hinder other divisions' goals. By putting together a committee, and this is very much structured in the incident command system model from emergency management, by putting us all together, now we can all focus on the same goals. We can work together. You'll see that we have a very set hierarchy on how folks work together inside of groups, and then those groups report up. And then how then it reports up to our policy group, because for Denver Water, it's our board who makes final decisions on any type of restrictions. This organizational structure has worked wonderfully for us in the last couple of years, and we've really seen a lot of progress this year on how it has allowed us to be more flexible and adapt. So I wanted to go over our drought response stages, and I think that probably a lot of jurisdictions match up with these. It's very kind of common to have. The drought watch stage, I will say, is only a couple years old for Denver Water. We actually implemented that back in I think it was 2015, and that was because we found that going straight into a stage one, we hadn't been able to help our customers come to the mental realization that this was, actually going to happen. So we go from telling them to use, water 3 days a week, normal watering rules, straight into restricting them. And so the drought watch allowed them to change their mentality, but it also gave them the opportunity to voluntarily restrict. Maybe they could actually save enough water on their own where we wouldn't need to go into restrictions, and empowers them a little bit, but then also gets them ready. Stage one restrictions is when we really start cutting into water that folks use just kind of daily, mostly of course inside of outdoor irrigation. We cut folks down to either 1 or 2 days per week, just depends upon what our needs are at the time. And we have a set schedule that people would follow in outdoor irrigation. Stage two is when we ban most outdoor irrigation. The key here is most. The tree canopy inside of Denver, and I'm sure all the municipalities out there feel the same way, the tree canopy not only provides a quality of life for your citizens, but in addition, it provides the shade that you need in order to make sure temperatures don't spiral out of control. And in fact, without the tree canopy, you could use more water in HVAC and other type of systems than if you just were able to continue to water trees. So even when we get to a stage two, we still allow hand watering of trees. And in our parks, Denver park system, we still allow for the maintenance of those trees in order to ensure that they stay healthy. And of course, it takes so long to grow back trees. Stage three, we have a plan for, but it's very important to note that our board is adamant that we do everything we can to always make sure that we stay at stage two restrictions or below. And I'm so sorry, I'm holding back a sneeze. Just 1 second. Oh, sorry about that. That was a fight I was not good. Thank you. A fight I was not going to win. All right. So our stage three restrictions, our board is very adamant that we never get there. Our plan is all based upon staying at stage two or before. So we act early, we act proactively in order to ensure that stage three is never a reality. But we do have a plan for it, and I encourage each of you to also have a plan for those stage three restrictions, which means rationing indoor water use. It's not a situation you want to be in, but should have a plan for it. So let's talk a little bit about Denver Water's current conditions. And I know that the Denver Water, of course, is a very specific municipality, and many of you are not in the area or may even be pretty far away, but just to kind of indicate to you what's happening really up and down the Front Range. So this is the Snowpack, snow water equivalent that is within Denver Water's system. So this is not the South Platte River as a whole. This is specific to Denver Water snowtail sites. You'll see on the South Platte, we're actually doing okay. We peaked at 97% of our normal peak of snowpack. And because of the cold and wet conditions, we've really kind of been able to maintain that snowpack. And in fact, you can see even now we're kind of progressing further along with the snow than we normally would. Of course, keep in mind the very dry soils that we have everywhere in the state can really impact the amount of stream flow that we'll expect to see. But as far as snow goes, South Platte was okay. And then it's really a tale of two areas, right? So then we look at the Colorado River collection system. Again, this is specific to Denver Water. This system peaked at 92% of normal, and but just has really never been very good all year, right? It's especially if you look back into early February, that was very much a scary time to be looking at the snowpack, but there was only a few fortuitous storms that were able to kind of pull us out. And so every year we have to look towards, is that going to happen again? The soils are so dry on the western slope, even more so now, especially than the South Platte, that the amount of stream flow that we're expecting is quite low. We'll talk about that in a second, but just to kind of understand that there really are two systems that Denver Water has, and one of them is not doing very well. Now, for us, luckily, we have the ability to transport in between systems. We can substitute. A lot of municipalities don't have that, and especially in the western slope, and we certainly want to keep that in mind. We understand that there are a lot of folks that are hurting far worse than we are. So as far as our reservoir contents, we expect to peak at about 93% of full, which is okay. It's not bad, but it's not good. It's enough where we don't think that we'll be going on to any type of restrictions in the next, a couple of weeks, a month. That could always change depending on stream flow and runoff, but we're still kind of in a wait and see mode. We have not recommended drought watch to our board yet. But the big thing to look at is the stream flow projections. Right now, they're 53% of normal to 93% of normal, pretty big range. And that's because of the two systems. In the Blue River above Dillon, we're looking at 53% of average stream flows, which is pretty bad. And then over on the South Platte, we're looking at 93, 94% of average stream flows, which is pretty good. So very much a tale of two different places. And then I wanted to show you this too. This gives you an idea of how cool it has been here in the first 4 months of the year, at least for Denver Water's collection system. So anything on the left side of the y-axis shows you the cooler months, and all four have fallen cooler than average. And then March was definitely wetter than average by a good chunk as well. So in our collection system as a whole, weather has definitely been cooler and wetter. Especially, this is of course everything averaged together, includes the South Platte, but that has allowed the snowpack to hang around longer than it would have. And in addition, as you'll see here, especially on this, let's look at the graphic on the right, our daily use, the average is that blue line. That is our normal, that's our expected water use based on a running 20-year average. You'll see that the actual use is pretty well below that blue line, especially when you look at previous hot years where you would see the actual use far above the expected water use. So demand is down, which is excellent. That helps us, of course, to maintain our supplies. And it means that people are following their instincts and kind of the rules of not watering when it's raining. But then on the left, the supply reservoir contents, there's a lot of information here, but what I'd like you to look at is on the very right, the percent full, that column that has the three different columns in it. If you look at Dillon, right now it's at 82% full, and the median is 90%. And with the stream flow forecasts, it's possible that it'll be even lower when we are done with the filling season between current and historical median. So, and then you look at our South Platte reservoirs, and they are either at or slightly below average. So very, very different to see. So that being the case of where we are, what are we doing as far as communications and outreach all up and down the Front Range? How are we making sure that everybody's working together on this? The first thing we do is communications to our customers and actually anyone who is signed up with us through social media or our own website. The two items we really focus on before irrigation season, and both of these are previous to irrigation season, are changing landscape, right? There's so many different native plants and drought resistant plants that are beautiful that can absolutely be put in place of Kentucky bluegrass or other really water intensive type of plants. We really push people towards Resource Central is an amazing resource for us, but also this Garden in a Box program we have, things like that, to really help to get some of the turf up. And we also focus on strategic problems, challenges that we have, such as the Colorado River, and challenges that are coming up with that as far as potential curtailment. 50% again of our water comes from the Colorado River, so any curtailment along that system is a big impact on us. And so the first communication point for us is our customers, to make sure that we get the right mentality. They understand that we live in a dry and arid region and that they have to try to do their part. And so in addition to that, to our customers, we have internal and external type of communications. Now, the internal, I showed you guys the Water Shortage Preparedness Committee. By the way, I encourage all of you to set up a similar committee, no matter how smaller or large your municipality. It's always good to have the right folks that are together and always meeting and discussing the goals and long-term planning for drought. A lot of times drought is, because it's a slow-moving disaster, it doesn't necessarily get the same level of coordination as the fast-moving disasters like wildfire or flooding, but it certainly does need the same attention. So we have regular coordination meetings with our internal Water Shortage Preparedness Committee. We present throughout the organization to let them know what we're doing, and when restrictions come into play, whenever they do in the future, what each division will be responsible for as well. So they have their own individual plans. And then we plan out scenarios both with drought and wildfire and Colorado curtailment, anything that comes up. Externally is what I really want to chat with you about in the next part of the presentation. Externally, Denver Water and Aurora Water decided that we needed something that was kind of region-wide that coordinated together on drought. There wasn't anything in place up to that point and hadn't been in the past. And so what we decided to do is create these first two Metro Drought and Front Range Drought coordination groups, but have since, as of last week, combined that into one. The Metro and the Front Range pretty much had the same participants. We've combined it into one group. We meet monthly, and in a second, you'll see all the different organizations that are in that group and what we plan for. And then you'll see, of course, what Megan was talking about, Municipal Water Impact Task Force. And what we hope is that the information at the local level inside of each municipality will be fed into the Front Range Drought Coordination Group. Then that group will feed its information into the State Municipal Water Impact Task Force. And then, of course, the information will then go back down through the Front Range group to the municipality. So in that way, we all have the big picture. And again, we're all working towards the same goal. And nobody feels that they're having to go it alone. So let's take a look at that group. I know it's a lot of folks on there, but that's actually a good thing, right? These are all the different entities that are part of the Front Range Drought Coordination Group. If any of you are interested in starting a regional group of your own, I first of all highly recommend that you do. And really all it takes is kind of start the email. What this one was word of mouth. We contacted Aurora Water and Denver Water, contacted a few entities that we knew, and all the ones that we had contact points for water efficiency or drought. And then they started to contact folks, and then the communications folks started to get involved. And before you know it, we have this really great group of folks. And we have a couple from the West Slope. And of course, this group is made up from all the major metro areas from Fort Collins all the way down to Pueblo. There's a bunch of things that we like to focus on, but one of the big things we look at is communication. In past droughts, what's happened is Denver Water or Aurora Water has really dominated the communications and messaging, not just in the Front Range, but also sometimes these messages go into the Western Slope, right? Because you've got these larger news stations and newspapers, and of course, social media that's originating inside of Denver. The message that Denver's giving its customers then gets relayed to all these other municipalities, where that message is most of the time not the same. There's different systems, there's different ways of going about drought and looking at restrictions. When Denver comes out and says, hey, we're doing okay, well, that's not the case for everyone. So we wanted to make sure that we're coordinating messaging. One of the great things to come out of this group are general messages that go out from all of us to all of our customers, but then also specifying when a message is very specific to a particular water utility. By doing that, if Denver Water puts out a message and someone in Grand County, say, picks it up, they'll hear the very general messages for everyone, and they'll understand where the message becomes specific to Denver Water customers, and ideally they can kind of tune that out. Along with the communication coordination that we've been doing, we've also been talking about how our systems interrelate. It's one of those things where, of course, all these systems are connected one way or another. It's all roads lead to Rome type of situation. And to understand how we all rely upon each other, how the management of one system will definitely impact another system, and then to also understand how our systems are different. Denver Water, of course, has this very expansive system that stretches out into the mountains and down to river basins, but other jurisdictions just have maybe a reservoir or two, and other jurisdictions are set up completely differently with groundwater. We really have started to create this understanding of systems that at least I didn't have before. It's very exciting to see. The final thing that I wanted to show you guys is that one of the big things that came out of this was after the March, you go ahead and click. After the March blizzard that we had on the Front Range, there was a lot of talk in Front Range media about it being a drought buster. And, of course, the people who live in Denver, you get 2.5 feet of snow, and it sure seemed like it, right? Visually and anecdotally, you look around and you say, well, we're out of drought, it doesn't matter. But as we started talking to our partners in the Western Slope, as we started talking to water managers up and down the Front Range, we started to realize that it was again, a tale of two systems. So first of all, you got to look at why is that the mentality? Why were people so quick to jump that a one-time event could completely bail us out of what is a pretty significant drought? Where did that mentality come from? And what we had decided inside of the coordination group is that we've had 2 large droughts previously, and both of them were saved by one-time just massive storms. So here we go, 2002. See the drought monitor on the top left, really a massive drought. And as you start going through, you get some storms into 2002 and 2003, but then the massive snowstorm that hit in March of 2003 dropped 72 inches of snow on Evergreen. It really covered the entire Front Range and into the Western Slope. That was a drought buster. All right, and we get into April of 2013, and again, you had some storms. You can see the drought monitor there. You had some storms over the summer of 2013 that helped to start cutting on that drought, but then you had a major rainstorm that came in September, and that kind of finished it off. That filled all the reservoirs. Denver Water is not, our reservoirs are not flood control reservoirs, but they were so low, they were able to capture an amazing amount of this water. It filled them and of course saved a lot of places from flooding, but you can just see that all of a sudden we had this major once in a lifetime, supposedly rain event that was able to get rid of that drought. So obviously people say going into this year, in March 6th, 2021, you can see where we were as far as the drought monitor. And then we get this major snowstorm, and everyone was really thinking, well, that did it, except if you look at the drought monitor before and after, you can see that yes, on the Eastern Slope, and especially since, right, what Megan was showing, you can see that drought has really been taken down a couple of levels in the east. But then if you look over in the west, really no help at all. An amazing amount of snow that really went east of the divide and over. And so we've really, through the Front Range Coordination Group, have been attempting to put out the word that this was not a drought buster. We still very much have to conserve water. The place where our water comes from is still very dry, and the people that live over there still are having problems. So just kind of one more visual to show the difference. So the blue line is this year, and you can see in March the snowpack, how it jumps just a little bit, and then as compared to 2002, 2003, really just levels different. That's in the Colorado River collection. And then if you look over at South Platte, same thing. Really an incredible difference. 2002, 2003 was a drought buster, but not this year. All right, and that's the end of the presentation. Really looking forward to any questions that you guys might have.
Great, thank you so much. And just a reminder, everyone, please remember to put any questions that you have in the question box, and we will get those asked to Megan and Jason. We do not have any questions at this time, but I do want to give a few moments for people to think of a question or type in a question if they think of one. So Jason, do you have any a final remark that you would like to make, or a final statement?
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I think the biggest one is that through a lot of trial and error over the last 20 years now, 19 years, Denver Water has realized that partnerships, planning, and really, communication has made sure that we are prepared for the future and we're planning with everyone and not just thinking of ourselves. And I encourage every municipality to really keep that in mind to do the same thing.
Great, thank you so much. I do have a question that came in from Melissa. Melissa is asking if you can talk about the difference between your role and the emergency management role at Denver Water.
That's a great question. And actually, so emergency management, the one big difference, emergency management is more of an ongoing permanent role. Mine, I'm always planning, but on the years where there's not drought, I'm part of our water efficiency group. And so when we're not really actively responding, doing these presentations, that type of thing, my job is half planning for the future on water shortage, and the other half is working with our large customers on water efficiency. So I think the first thing is one's full-time, one is not all the time. I work very closely with our emergency managers, but the way that we've differentiated is that the emergency manager really focuses on those short-term, immediate emergencies that I had kind of chatted about before. You know, the floods, the wildfires, and things like that. Whereas I am really looking at that slow-moving, long-term type of disaster, and that's the difference as well. I mean, just in the way that you approach things, it's not going to be as quick.
Great, thank you. Our next question comes from Leah, and Leah says that a garden in a box looks awesome, but they're all sold out. Are there any Western Slope ones that are similar that you know of?
It's a great question. You know, I don't, but I can certainly find out and then get an email back to you guys. Garden in the Box is a hugely successful program here, but they are limited, unfortunately. Yeah, I'll look into that. It's a good question.
Great, Lisa, thank you. All right, so those are the only questions that we have, or only 2 questions. So with that, Megan, I'm not sure if you want to jump in and make any final statements.
I don't have any final statements, just appreciate the time to share, and just let folks know that, you know, if you have drought related questions, you can always reach out to myself, others at the state, just to find resources or, you know, express concerns. But those engagement pages are the great place to start.
Thank you, Megan. And I did have another question come in here, Jason. This one might be for you. Carol's wondering what a garden in a box is.
Yeah, so Garden in the Box, and it's specific to an organization called Resource Central. And if you look up Resource Central's website, you'll be able to see more information. But basically what this is exactly what it sounds like. It's a box that you'll get, you go pick up, and inside of it, it'll have everything that you need in order to plant and sustain drought tolerant and native plants. And it's specifically made so that you can take up a portion of Kentucky bluegrass or other vegetation that takes a lot of water. You can pull that up, and instead you could put this garden into it, and it's just kind of a one place, get everything type of thing. It makes it a lot more efficient for our customers.
Great, thank you so much. So that is our last question. I want to say thank you again to Megan and to Jason for sharing your knowledge with us today. And thank you, listeners, for joining us. Once again, you will be able to find the presentation materials on our website under training materials. We thank you for joining us today. This concludes our webinar, and we hope you have a great day.